We left off our last discussion with how the United States emerged as the most powerful nation with the end of World War II in 1945. And this is because much of the rest of the world was war torn, and you see extremely high casualty rates, both military and civilian, and immense suffering because of the war. Comparatively speaking, the United States was pretty much unscathed, despite, some casualties. Well, quite a few, 500,000 almost, over 400,000 military servicemen and women died in the war. But again, this led to the United States assuming the mantle of the global superpower in the world. And because of that, they saw this as an opportune moment to restructure the world, the global order, according to the advantage of the United States. All right. So last time I mentioned that they had two goals in mind as they were trying to figure out how to undertake this project. And the two goals are, number one, to prevent another world war, and number two, to prevent another Great Depression. And of course, they are both correlated, historically speaking, as we mentioned, because, and we could delve into this just a little bit deeper than we did last time. The Great Depression was global, and you were affected by it during the 1930s if you were a capitalist-based economy in your country. Okay. Interesting side note here, the USSR, which was socialist, was not affected by the Great Depression. But if you were a capitalist country, you were affected, if not greatly, at least somewhat. So that means that for most capitalist nations, you experienced the worst crisis, economically speaking, in your country. And that crisis was due to the policies in some of these countries. Okay, now we don't have time to discuss in the United States, right, the causes of the Great Depression, but one cause that even worsened the Great Depression was a policy known as economic protectionism. Okay, and what is economic protectionism? Well, basically, it's the use of tariffs and quotas in your trade relations. And the purpose of this is to shield your nation's economy, your domestic economy, from foreign competition. All right. And if you've been paying attention to Trump administration and his economic approach, well, it's based on economic protectionism. All right. Now, going back to the 1930s, the early 1930s, you see the highest tariffs ever passed, or among the highest tariffs ever passed in our economic history, specifically the Hawley-Smoot tariff. If you've studied the Great Depression, you're aware of this. But in any case, these tariffs and quotas is what caused the Great Depression to even worsen at that time. All right, so what should have been done is the opposite of economic protectionism. Okay, economic protectionism and those tariffs were ill-advised, and that's actually putting it mildly. They were destructive to the economy back then. Okay, so what should have been done is the opposite, that most economists realize in hindsight, not economic protectionism, but to eliminate barriers to the free flow of capitalism. Just let it flow freely throughout the world, right? Rather than put up these barriers like tariffs and quotas. All right. By the way, you may ask, like, why did economic protectionism cause the Great Depression to get worse, to be exacerbated? Well, it's because you can imagine a trade war that ensues, right? Which actually happened. The United States tried to protect its national economy, but in the process, by putting up these high tariffs, other countries would retaliate against the United States and put up high tariffs against U.S. exports to their country. And, we needed to sell our exports in order to hopefully survive this Great Depression. But again, it was an ill-advised mood, and therefore it led to the worsening of the Great Depression, and therefore the worsening of suffering among the American public. Okay, so going back to after World War II, and by then the Great Depression had been cured, and you have policymakers planning this global order after World War II, and they realized they should not pursue economic protectionism. Rather, they should let capitalism flow freely, as I described earlier. Okay? So the perceived solution, again, was to build this global order based upon open trade amongst nations across the world. And economically, that entailed the elimination of protectionism. And politically, we have to add this, the promotion of liberal democracy worldwide. All right. So this was the perceived solution by these U.S. policymakers to, number one, prevent another world war, number two, prevent another Great Depression, and the two are obviously linked, as we've discussed, and in the process to reshape the global order, honestly, in our favor, because we are a capitalist country. We're the foremost and preeminent capitalist power in the world. And if you could reshape the world according to your economic interest, then obviously that behooves your economy. And the rationale to try to establish this on a global level, what you're going to do is convince other nations, right, that you should adopt capitalism and adopt the system of free trade again, right, to reject economic protectionism if you do decide to adopt a capitalist nation in your country. And I say that because, as I'll discuss, there's going to be many nations across the world that were former colonies of these various European empires, and they're going to gain their independence, and they're going to have to make decisions as a construct nation as to what type of economy they should establish in their newly sovereign nation. Should it be socialist? Should it be capitalist? Okay, now, interestingly enough, even before the end of World War II, in 1944, you see the Allied powers, United States and its wartime allies, agreeing to meet in the United States in this very small, nondescript town called Bretton Woods. And they decided to meet to discuss how to, again, reorder the world with the end of World War II. The handwriting was on the wall in terms of victory for the Allies by then. So they felt confident enough to have a meeting and discuss how to establish this. This became known as the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. And what it does is pretty much foreshadow this new world order based on free trade. Okay, and you see the various policies and approaches listed here that shows this commitment towards open trade. First of all, one thing that was required here, in order to establish, or it was, I should say rather, that it was thought to be a condition, was to make sure that any economic protectionist policies within capitalist countries were reversed, that they instead should establish free trade to eliminate, again, quotas and tariffs. Okay, so reverse protectionist policies while firmly committing to international free market trade. Okay, by the way, when you hear that term free market trade, this is, again, this idea of, the free market rather than regulated, right? Regulated by quotas and tariffs. Okay, another thing they did is establish on a global level this stable exchange system, and they pegged it on the US dollar. Why? Because the United States is the strongest economy after the war by far, and therefore they decided to peg this exchange rate on the US dollar being the strongest currency. Okay, it used to be the gold standard that they used to peg peg it on back then, and then certainly the pound once in a while, the English pound. But now it's the U.S. dollar, okay? And this is going to be true until the 1970s, okay? But again, making sure the United States, the American dollar here is established as the global currency, the measure of global currency. Okay, they established two institutions here that are still with us today, okay? That's the International Monetary Fund, usually called the IMF. And then there's the World Bank. In 1944, during Bretton Woods, they had a different name for this, but today it's known as the World Bank. And what is the purpose here? Well, the purpose of these institutions, they are financial institutions, finance, right? They are intended to provide loans for war-torn countries to, to recover their economies, to repair them in the aftermath of World War II. So what's being done here is to, again, provide loans to help those countries, right? But notice here that, you have to be a capitalist country, right, in order to participate or to be beneficiaries of these loans. Okay, so, and there's other things associated with the Bretton Woods Agreement, but again, even before the end of the war, in 1944, this is foreshadowing the U.S.'s commitment to open trade, right, to establish this on a global order. Right. And like I said, today, we still have the International Monetary Fund. Notice the term international. That's global, right? Or World Bank, world, right? So the whole idea here is, and some historians and economists agree with this is the first step towards economic globalization, right? No longer do you see these economies insulated, if you will, or, cut off from the rest of the world, right? You see these linkages that become transnational, right? And here's where we see really the beginning of it, especially economically, foreshadowed by the Bretton Woods Agreement. And again, the Bretton Woods Agreement foreshadows the U.S.'s hegemony on the global level. Hegemony meaning, dominance, okay? Okay, so this brings up a question. And it's here in the very bottom here of this slide. What is the obstacle for this vision of global capitalism, right? This is a vision, should be obvious to you. This Bretton Woods Agreement is a vision that they want to realize. Well, what could be a barrier or an obstacle for this vision of global capitalism? Well, hopefully it's clear to you that socialism as a political theory and practice, and as an economic theory and practice, is the exact antithesis of capitalism, right? So if you're trying to establish a world order based on capitalism, yet there are socialist economies in the world, and moreover, there are some nations, again, destroyed by World War II, or even being given independence because they used to be a colony, right? And that empire collapsed, that European empire, the mother country collapsed, could not hold on to their colonies. So you see a mass wave of decolonization, which did occur after World War II, okay? What if they went socialist instead of capitalist? Well, that's going to impede upon this realization of this order based on global capitalism. All right, so hopefully you could see the connection here and why even the Bretton Woods Agreement is foreshadowing of the tension. Now, I don't want to claim that the Bretton Woods Agreement caused the Cold War, right? But it does adumbrate, it does foreshadow it by clearly delineating these conditions that is suggestive of a global capitalist order and free trade on an international level.